In October of 2012, the Canadians men's national soccer team lost 8-1 to Honduras, breaking their hopes of qualifying for the World Cup. 14 years later, and they're winning games in the knockout round of this competition.
Just dropping nicely. Estaquio!
Celebrations at a Canadian watch party in Los Angeles because Canada have made history. They are into the last 16 at the World Cup for the first time, and it's all thanks to a lone goal from Steven Eustáquio.
From being seen as a hockey-loving country who only cares about moose and igloos to sending a message to the world of soccer, this is the rise of the Canadian men's national team.
Here it's Kyle Ryan! Defensive deflection and taken it first time. Save up the line. It's twice for Jonathan David. It's kindly for Jonathan David. And there is his hat trick. Well, Davies arriving! Oh!
I specifically said the Canadians men's team because the women's team has had a lot of success in the past. They first made a name for themselves on the world stage at the 2003 Women's World Cup, where they finished 4th after losing the 3rd place match to the United States. They then reached their first Olympic tournament in 2008 and made it all the way to the quarterfinals. Then at the 2020 Tokyo Olympics, they shocked the world by winning the gold medal. On top of that, Canada has won the CONCACAF Women's Championship twice and has also taken home 2 Olympic bronze medals, making them one of the most successful women's national teams in the world. But the men's team does not have a rich history like that. The 2026 World Cup is only the 3rd time they've been at the competition. And keep in mind, they auto-qualified because they were hosting. The first time they qualified for the World Cup was back in 1986. Unlike today's squad filled with players from top European leagues, this Canadian team was made up largely of semi-professional players and indoor soccer veterans. Under English manager Tony Waiters, Canada earned its place at the tournament by defeating Honduras 2-1 in Newfoundland, securing both its first CONCACAF title and its first ever World Cup qualification. When the tournament began, Canada was thrown straight into one of the toughest groups imaginable, alongside France, the Soviet Union, and Hungary. Facing a French side packed with stars, Canada frustrated the Europeans for nearly 80 minutes. Goalkeeper Paul Dolan made several important saves, while the defense stayed compact and organized. For long stretches, Canada looked capable of pulling off a famous upset before a late French goal finally broke them down and they lost 1-0. Their effort earned widespread respect around the football world, but unfortunately, the physical demands of Canada's defensive approach began to take their toll. A 2-0 loss to Hungary followed, before another 2-0 defeat against the Soviet Union ended their tournament. On paper, the numbers were not impressive. Canada lost all 3 matches, failed to score a goal, and finished at the bottom of the group. But their story was far bigger than the results. This was a team that had reached the World Cup against the odds and proved it belonged on the same pitch as some of the strongest nations in football. While they left Mexico without a point, they earned something almost as valuable: respect. 36 years after their first World Cup appearance, Canada finally returned to the biggest stage in football at the 2022 World Cup in Qatar. This was a completely different Canada from the team that qualified in 1986. Led by manager John Herdman, the Canadians topped the CONCACAF qualifying table and arrived in Qatar with genuine excitement. Their squad had stars playing for some of Europe's biggest clubs, like Alphonso Davies and Jonathan David. They also played with a fearless attacking style that many people enjoyed. Their opening match against Belgium showed exactly why people were excited. The Canadians pressed aggressively, created chance after chance, and looked like the better side for large stretches of the match. They even got an early penalty, but Alphonso Davies saw his efforts saved by Thibaut Courtois. Canada's failure to take their chances came back to haunt them, because just before halftime, Michy Batshuayi scored for Belgium, handing the Europeans a 1-0 win, despite being second best for much of the game. The next match against Croatia, though, delivered a historic moment. Just 68 seconds into the game, Alphonso Davies powered home a header from a Buchanan cross, scoring Canada's first ever goal at a men's World Cup. For a brief moment, it felt like the Canadians might be on the verge of something special, but Croatia quickly reminded everyone why they were World Cup finalists 4 years earlier. Canada's final match came against Morocco. 2 early defensive mistakes put them behind 2-0, and although they pulled a goal back before halftime, they couldn't find an equalizer. A 2-1 defeat ended their tournament and confirmed a 3rd straight loss. The lessons were painful at times, but they helped lay the foundation for the team that would eventually host the World Cup just 4 years later. That's what you are watching now, a Canadian team playing with immense confidence on the world's biggest stage. They have come a long way since October 16th of 2012. a moment that felt like rock bottom for Canadian men's soccer. Canada only needed a draw in their final qualifying match to reach the last round of the 2014 World Cup qualifying. Instead, they traveled to Honduras and suffered one of the darkest days in Canadian soccer history, an 8-1 humiliation. The result exposed just how many problems existed within Canadian soccer at the time. The team looked slow, disorganized, and completely fell apart under pressure. What made it even more shocking was that Canada's defense had been their biggest strength throughout qualifying, conceding just 2 goals in their previous 5 matches. They arrived in Honduras confident that 1 point was well within reach, but inside the hostile atmosphere of Estadio Olímpico Metropolitano, that confidence disappeared almost immediately. Within minutes, everything unraveled, and Canada's World Cup dream was over before they even had a chance to fight for it. One of the reasons Canada fell apart in 2012 was simple. They didn't have the infrastructure to consistently produce top-level players. If you were a talented young player back then, your options were limited. You either had to leave Canada at a young age and hope to get into a European academy, or stay home and play in local youth leagues that simply weren't producing players ready for international football. After that embarrassing defeat to Honduras, Canadian soccer knew something had to change. The first big step came from Canada's 3 MLS clubs, Toronto FC, Vancouver Whitecaps, and Club de Football Montreal. They invested heavily in fully funded professional academies, giving talented kids access to elite coaching, sports science, and a clear pathway into professional football. It also removed many of the financial barriers that had stopped talented players from lower income families from reaching the top. Those academies became the foundation of Canada's new generation. The best example is Alphonso Davies, who came through the Vancouver Whitecaps Academy before becoming one of the best players in the world in his position. The next major step came in 2019 with the launch of the Canadian Premier League. Before then, many Canadian players had nowhere to go after finishing academy football if they weren't ready for the MLS or Europe. The CPL filled that gap by giving them a professional league at home where they could keep developing and proving themselves. The league has now grown into a stable 8-team competition and has become an important source of talent for the national team. Now, a lot of you ask me where I find some of these stories, stats, and details that don't make it into the videos. That's exactly why I created Dark Web Football on PetTalkSports.com. It's my premium section where I post exclusive football articles, deeper research, player stories, the kind of content that usually gets cut from YouTube videos because there's just not enough time. If you want to go beyond the headlines and see the full story behind the game and get some free jerseys, check out Dark Web Football using the link below. While Canada's football infrastructure was improving, there was still one other big problem, and that was the mentality. They now had good, talented players, but many of them didn't have the belief that they could compete on the biggest stage. That changed in 2018 when Canada Soccer hired John Herdman as the men's national team manager. Herdman had already transformed the women's team, leading them to back-to-back Olympic bronze medals. But many people questioned whether his emotional, player-first approach would work with the men's team. Herdman quickly realized that Canada's biggest weakness wasn't technical, it wasn't physical, it was all mental. For years, players would arrive at national team camp as individuals. They came from different clubs, different countries, and different backgrounds. There wasn't a real sense of unity. Herdman set out to change that by creating what the team called the Brotherhood. Was Herdman trying to create a soccer team or build a brotherhood of Assassin's Creed? He challenged the players to put their egos aside and play for something bigger than themselves. The bond between the squad became incredibly strong and it showed on the pitch. The players fought for each other, covered each other's mistakes, and ran themselves into the ground for the badge. Canada went from being a team that folded under pressure, like the Toronto Maple Leafs, to one that was incredibly difficult to beat. Herdman also gave the team some tactical flexibility. Instead of just sticking to one formation, he taught the players to play in several different systems and switched between them during matches depending on the situation. That adaptability, combined with the new belief inside the squad, helped Canada start winning the tough away games in CONCACAF where previous generations had so often fallen short. Everything Herdman had built came together during Canada's incredible 2022 World Cup qualifying campaign. Canada finished first in CONCACAF, ahead of traditional giants like Mexico and the US. Along the way, they produced a series of performances that showed the footballing world, or the soccer world, this was no longer the same old Canada. The first statement came in Nashville against the US. Canada went behind early, but instead of falling apart, they fought back. Fonzie burst down the left wing before squaring the ball for Kyle Larin to tap home the equalizer. A 1-1 draw doesn't sound so sexy, but it did show that Canada could go toe-to-toe with one of the region's best teams away from home. A month later came another breakthrough. Canada traveled to the legendary Estadio Azteca to face Mexico, a stadium where they had been beaten countless times before. After falling behind, they once again refused to panic. Jonathan Osorio scored just before halftime to earn another huge 1-1 draw and prove this team had found a new level of belief. Then came one of the most iconic moments in Canadian soccer history. Against Panama in Toronto, Alphonso Davies chased down the ball that looked certain to roll out of play. Somehow he kept it in and scored a stunning solo goal that helped Canada earn another massive win. But the defining image of the campaign came a month later in Edmonton. With snow piled around the pitch and freezing temperatures making life miserable for Mexico, Canada embraced the conditions. I mean, this is just a normal December day in Canada. They played with relentless energy, feeding off the home crowd as Kyle Larin scored twice in a famous 2-1 win. Finally came the crowning moment. Needing just 1 point to qualify for the World Cup, Canada completely overwhelmed Jamaica in front of a packed crowd in Toronto. Goals from Kyle Larin, Tejan Buchanan, and Junior Hualet sealed a dominant 4-0 win and ended a 36-year wait to return to the World Cup. 36 years, man. That's like losing your World Cup virginity again. But after John Herdman left, Canada was faced with another turning point. In May of 2024, Canada Soccer hired Jesse Marsch, one of the biggest coaching appointments in the country's history. Marsch arrived with experience coaching at the highest level in Europe and brought a style that perfectly matched Canada's biggest strengths, which is their speed, athleticism, and relentless work rate. He quickly introduced an aggressive pressing system. Out of possession, Canada defend in a very compact 4-4-2 shape, squeezing the middle of the pitch and forcing opponents out wide into pressing traps. The team stayed narrow, worked together, and made life incredibly difficult for teams trying to play through them. The moment Canada won the ball back, everything changed. The midfield moves the ball forward almost instantly, releasing players like Davies and Buchanan into space before the opposition could recover. It was fast and direct, making it exhausting for opponents to deal with. Of course, this system demands incredible fitness, discipline, and total commitment from every player on the pitch. But since everybody has bought into Jesse Marsch's system, you can see the impact. At the 2024 Copa America, Canada shocked the soccer world by reaching the semifinals in their tournament debut. And I mean, these guys weren't just there to make up the numbers. They went toe-to-toe with some of South America's biggest nations, proving they belonged on that stage. Just as importantly, Marsch fit perfectly into the culture that Herdman had already built. He was demanding and completely authentic, wearing his emotions on his sleeve. The players bought into that personality almost immediately. Herdman had created the brotherhood, but Marsch was keeping that culture alive, while adding a clear tactical identity, turning Canada into an even more organized and dangerous team than before. That was on full display at the 2026 World Cup, as Canada made history in the group stage. They got their first ever point against Bosnia, then got their first ever win, spanking Qatar. That performance became the most watched World Cup group stage match in Canadian history. An average of 5.3 million people tuned in, while a staggering 11.7 million unique viewers watched across different platforms like TSN, CTV, and Crave. At its peak, the broadcast reached 7.3 million viewers, even beating the audience of Game 7 of the 2025 World Series. If you are a Blue Jays fan like me, maybe you don't need a reminder of that game. Now, these numbers were not just a one-off. By the end of the group stage, more than 24.9 million unique Canadians had watched at least part of the World Cup. I mean, that's around 61% of the entire country's population. For a nation where hockey, baseball, and basketball have dominated the national landscape, it was a reminder that soccer has also arrived. Add in the win against South Africa, and it's been a wonderful time if you are a Canadian. I mean, that game was like watching paint dry, but hey, at least Canada won. No matter what happens now, this team has already made history. It's been one of the most incredible rises ever from a national team. Now, there are so many good players on this team that I didn't cover individually in this video, and that's because I've made a separate video looking at their journeys, their best qualities, and what to expect from them. To see that video, you gotta click right here.